The following story is inspired by the breathtaking, true historical events of William and Ellen Craft, an enslaved couple who orchestrated one of the most daring and ingenious escapes in American history in December 1848. The first cut: the heaviest chains are not always made of iron. Sometimes they are forged from the constant, suffocating terror of discovery. In the dim, flickering candlelight of a small wooden cabin in Macon, Georgia, Ellen sat perfectly still. Behind her stood William, the man she loved with a quiet, desperate ferocity. In his trembling hands, he held a pair of heavy iron shears. "Are you certain, my love?" William whispered, his voice catching in the thick, humid air of the night. "Once I make this cut, there is no turning back. We step into the fire." Ellen looked at her reflection in a small, cracked shard of mirror resting on the rough-hewn table. She was a woman born into the horrors of slavery, yet she possessed skin as pale as the men who claimed to own her, cruel, living testament to the violence of the plantation system. For 22 years, her appearance had been a source of danger and distress. Tonight, it was going to be their salvation. "Cut it, William," Ellen said, her voice dropping into a register of iron resolve. "I would rather die on the road as a free man than live another day as a captive woman." The shears closed. Dark, heavy curls fell to the dirt floor. With every lock that dropped, the enslaved woman named Ellen began to disappear. Their plan was an act of unfathomable audacity. Running away into the swamps meant almost certain death or recapture by men with hounds. Instead, they would hide in plain sight. They would travel first class. William bound Ellen's jaw tightly with a poultice and white linen, feigning a severe toothache that would excuse him from speaking. She donned a pair of dark green spectacles to hide her terrified, expressive eyes. She placed her right arm in a heavy sling, a brilliant excuse to avoid signing hotel registries or ferry tickets, as it was illegal for enslaved people to read or write. Finally, she put on a tailor-made gentleman's suit, complete with a top hat. When she stood, the transformation was complete. She was no longer Ellen. She was Mr. William Johnson, a wealthy, sickly young cotton planter traveling north to Philadelphia for urgent medical care. And William, with his dark skin and strong build, would travel not as her husband, but as her loyal, enslaved servant. Into the lion's den dawn broke over the Macon train station, painting the sky in colors of bruised purple and gold. The air smelled of sharp pine and the suffocating, acrid smoke of the steam engine. The character arc, the shift from the powerless to the architects of their own fate, began the moment they stepped onto the platform. William trailed a few paces behind Ellen, carrying the heavy leather trunks. His heart hammered furiously against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of sheer panic. Every white face on the platform was a potential executioner. Every casual glance felt like a burning spotlight. Ellen walked with a slow, deliberate limp, leaning heavily on a cane. She channeled the arrogance of the men who had oppressed her entire life. She kept her chin high, her shoulders squared, refusing to break the illusion. "2 tickets to Savannah," William said to the station master, gesturing respectfully to the disguised Ellen. "My master is very ill. He requires immediate transport." The station master barely glanced at Ellen. He saw the clothes, the bandages, the posture of entitlement, and he saw a wealthy white man. He handed over the tickets. They boarded the train. For the first time in their lives, they were sitting in a first-class carriage. The velvet seats felt like fire beneath Ellen. Across from her sat a Confederate officer, his boots polished, his sword resting casually against his knee. Next to her was a wealthy plantation owner, discussing the price of human lives as if they were talking about the weather. Ellen stared straight ahead through the green glass of her spectacles. Underneath the heavy wool suit, she was sweating profusely. If the officer noticed the lack of a beard beneath the bandages, if the planter recognized her face from a neighboring county, she and William would be dragged off the train and lynched. For 2 agonizing days, they traveled by train and steamboat. Ellen played the role of the invalid perfectly. She feigned deafness when spoken to, gesturing weakly with her left hand while William intervened, apologizing profusely for his master's terrible condition. William was the protector, the voice, the shield. He fetched her meals, he arranged her blankets, and he kept the inquisitive eyes of Southern gentlemen at bay. But the further north they traveled, the tighter the security became. The climax at the board of the ultimate test, the climax of their terrifying performance, arrived in Baltimore, Maryland. It was the final major checkpoint before crossing into the free state of Pennsylvania. The train station in Baltimore was a chaotic cathedral of iron and steam. Uniformed officers patrolled the platforms with sharp, suspicious eyes. The laws in Baltimore were brutally strict regarding the transport of enslaved people. Too many had escaped by train, and the rail companies now demanded absolute proof of ownership before allowing any black person to cross the state line. Ellen and William approached the final ticket gate. The air was frigid, but William felt a bead of sweat trace its way down his spine. The ticket master, a broad-shouldered man with a cynical sneer, took their tickets and looked William up and down. "Where are you taking this boy?" the ticket master demanded, looking past William to address the bandaged, bespectacled figure of Ellen. "My master is bound for Philadelphia, sir, for medical treatment," William answered, his voice steady despite the absolute terror gripping his lungs. "I didn't ask you, boy," the ticket master snapped. He stepped closer to Ellen, his eyes narrowing. "It is against company policy to let a slave pass into Pennsylvania without the master providing a bond of ownership. I need to see your papers, sir. Prove he belongs to you, or he doesn't get on this train." The world seemed to stop spinning. The hiss of the steam engines faded into a dull, echoing roar in Ellen's ears. This was the moment. There were no papers. There was no bond. If they missed this train, they would be stranded in Baltimore, where slave catchers roamed the streets like hungry wolves. William tensed, his muscles coiling. If he had to fight, he would. He would tear the ticket master apart to give Ellen a chance to run. But Ellen did not run. She dug deep into the well of her own courage, completing her transformation. She was no longer a victim. She was a warrior armed with the weapons of the enemy. She leaned heavily on her cane, forcing a violent, racking cough that shook her entire small frame. She slowly raised her left hand, pointing a trembling, indignant finger directly at the ticket master's chest. She did not speak. She couldn't risk the pitch of her voice, but she let out a sharp, furious sound of aristocratic disgust. William stepped forward, catching Ellen's cue perfectly. "Sir, you are upsetting him," William cried out, his voice laced with manufactured panic. "My master is a gentleman of great standing, and his health is failing by the minute. If we are delayed here and he perishes, his family in Georgia will hold you personally responsible. Do you wish to explain to a wealthy Southern family why their son died in your station over a piece of paper?" The ticket master hesitated. He looked at the sickly, enraged young gentleman in the expensive suit, and then at the loyal servant. The threat of a lawsuit from a wealthy Southern family was a terrifying prospect for a working-class rail employee. The ticket master swallowed hard, his cynical demeanor cracking under the weight of Ellen's unyielding, silent glare. All right, the ticket master muttered, stamping the tickets. "Go on, then. But it's against my better judgment." The dawn of liberty, the rhythmic clacking of the train wheels over the tracks sounded like a heartbeat. Clack, clack. Freedom. Clack, clack. Freedom. When the conductor finally walked through the carriage and announced, "Next stop, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania," Ellen closed her eyes behind the green spectacles. A single tear slipped down her cheek, soaking into the white linen bandages. They arrived in the city of brotherly love under the cover of a freezing, starry night. They disembarked the train and walked through the cobblestone streets until they reached the address of the known abolitionist safe house. Once the heavy oak door was bolted shut behind them, the silence of the room felt heavier than the noise of the train. Slowly, with trembling hands, William reached out. He untied the knot of the sling. He gently unwrapped the heavy linen bandages from Ellen's jaw. He pulled the green spectacles from her face, finally looking into her bright, tear-filled eyes. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the air of a free state. The disguise was gone. The aristocratic planter was dead. "We did it," she whispered, her voice rough from days of forced silence. "William, we are free." William pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her shortened hair. The conflicts of the past 4 days, the terrifying near misses, the suffocating disguise, the weight of their own history dissolved into the warmth of their embrace. Their character arcs were complete. They had stepped onto the train in Georgia as property, disguised as master and servant. They stepped into the light of Philadelphia as William and Ellen, husband and wife, 2 human beings, finally and forever reclaiming the rights to their own lives, leaving behind a masterpiece of deception that the world would never forget.